Welcome to Transform Now, a podcast focused on intelligent automation and brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. On this program, we talk about how organizations globally are rethinking the way they operate, utilizing process orchestration and AI-enabled digital workers to free up humans to do the work that matters most. We also share insights and tips on how you can embrace this new way of working and unleash your full potential. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Marchuk. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. In this episode, I've got two brilliant guests who are both authors and speakers, and each has been a guest here before. So I'll start with Tonille. Tonille Miller is the author of The Flourishing Effect, and Juliette Powell, author of the AI Dillema. Today, we're going to talk about some of the subjects of our changing workplace that we're all seeing, from hybrid work to the whole technology advances with AI, and how our Western societies are feeling as we push towards these changes. I'm just here to facilitate the conversation, so I'm so glad that you guys are here today.
Yay, we're happy to be here too.
Let's say that it's all your fault, Michael.
It is all my fault, and I take full responsibility for that one. So I want to start out, and this is going to be an open thing. I've got questions for each of you, but I would like you both kind of chime in on these things too, because I think it's important to get both perspectives. First, today, Tonille, you just published an article that talked about ikigai. I'm not really good at
Ikigai.
Ikigai, that one, or our reason for being. And I know you've written a ton on this whole concept of purpose and whatnot. And I'd like to get both of your opinions on this from the perspective of the digital transformation efforts that organizations are putting so much effort into.
Yeah. When it comes to purpose and digital transformation, I think that, and I'm sure, Juliette, I can't wait to hear what you have to say as well, but I think really this is one of those fundamental human needs, and people want it, need it in life. They wanted it in work for a long time. A lot of the industrial revolutions, cornerstones that have come in have really removed a lot of that purpose and meaning from the work, because it's actually made it much more like the cog in the machine type of activity, where the work was stripped of meaning and creativity and things like that. And so my hope actually is now with AI and other forms of technology, we can actually automate a lot of those pieces of the work that was really non-meaningful and elevate the humans so that the work they do absolutely is meaningful. So that's my hope for that.
I like your hope, and I concur. That's very optimistic. I think it will also take a lot of change within organizations, especially more traditional industries where everything has been top down up until now. And I think that the ability of AI to not only automate the routine is one side of things. On the other side of things, you've got all of these amazing humans within organizations that are using these tools every day in their own lives, and in some cases are bringing them into the organization. Their bosses, their colleagues aren't even aware of it. So why not harness all of these capabilities from the bottom up? Create these wonderful working groups around AI. How are you using it? How do you think we might be able to use the tools that you already know how to use in order to optimize what we're doing within the organization? So it's really aligning not just the purpose of the technology, the purpose of the organization, but also giving power to the people that are using it, who understand where the company is trying to go and what you're trying to achieve with all of these things. And I think that aligns much more purpose in what you're doing when you feel like you're having an impact, that regardless of your job title, you actually have something to contribute, which might not even be part of your specific role, but that you've mastered. So I want to see more geeks and geezers getting together, and I want to see more bottom-up work where we can really maximize the opportunities and also minimize the potential harms, of course.
That is so great, because that really touches on the co-creation part, and that is absolutely a commitment builder and a meaning maker as well. I love that.
Tonille, you mentioned something that I thought I want to key off on, that is talk about the cogs in the machines. And I think over the past several decades, we've really spent a lot of time creating machines into which people fit as part of our organizations. We've built systems that we've had to train our people to leverage, to make use of, to capture the information, to track the information, to facilitate business and whatnot. Do you see that AI breaking some of that machinery viewpoint and bringing more creativity or strategic thought back into that process?
I do. From my perspective, one of the main benefits of it, especially for the employee, is the fact that it does automate some of that monotonous, mundane, non-creative, non-strategic, non-meaningful work. So if it does that, if and when it does that, then it as a result, it really should be freeing up that human for that more creative, strategic, innovative type of work and the most humane types of work. So I think so. I hope so. I guess we're going to see. I would love to hear some stories, maybe Juliette, if you have them, or if we can think of some other organizations that are actually pretty far down the AI path. I'd love to see what they're seeing as far as not just money saved and time saved, which is all very important, but also what are their people saying as a result? Are they feeling more meaning in their work? Are they seeing that they can employ more of that creativity? And also in using the tools as well to be more creative. So not just freeing them up for the creative work, but also I use GPT all the time. I use some of these other models, and I'm sure you folks do as well. And oh my gosh, it's such a benefit as far as creativity goes. You hit that writer's block moment or any other kind of a blockage for a moment, or you just need like an outside perspective. And it's pretty amazing.
I know for me, which has absolutely nothing to do with work, I have stumbled upon all these music making sites, and I have found some my creative outlets because I can't sing and I can't play an instrument. This is really helping me to craft music in a way that I never could do it myself in the past. So this has been interesting to unleash other creative outlets for me. So as we look to the future, so Juliette, I know you are helping to shape these future leaders from your classes that you teach at NYU. After these students start to grasp sort of the challenges of leading a business after they graduate, can you describe the views on how intentional risk might come into the way they are looking at building out this future?
What's really fascinating to me is that we've got students that are about to graduate, both at the undergrad level, the graduate level, the PhD level, who are questioning whether their skills will have any value by the time they graduate because of these tools. So they're not even necessarily thinking, wow, this is going to aid my creativity. This is a great opportunity for me to go start a company. They're asking, how am I going to fit within an organization that's downsizing their humans because they're investing more and more in these automating tools? And so it's been fascinating to walk them through the history of technology and how at every generation we've seen technologies coming in with that means that certain jobs are departing, new jobs are coming, and that they're really at that cusp and also changing. I think the expectation that university is supposed to teach you certain skills that you're supposed to take as their puzzle pieces to put into an organization as is. I think the most important thing is that they're learning creative thinking, they're learning critical thinking, and they're also learning at the very basic level, like the rest of us, how businesses and how technology companies are using these tools. And in many cases, they don't agree. In many cases, they're pushing back. They're seeing all of the lawsuits. They feel like that's exactly the right thing to do, that we should have class action lawsuits. They resent the idea that their creative works are being sucked in to train many of these tools. And so I'm seeing more and more of them actually applying to the incubators at NYU to see if they can begin to leverage these technologies as entrepreneurs, but in a responsible way. And what does that look like for them, depending on where they're coming from? It's either tools very much in the Arianna Huffington space, where they really care about self-care, and they're trying to create tools that allow one to do that while being a cog in the machine simultaneously. Because as we know, many of these businesses are quite slow, in fact, to get away from Taylorism, because technology like AI really enables it more and more, this big surveillance state, right? So there's this balance of what can we do as young entrepreneurs? I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, but heck, if I'm not doing it, who's going to do it next? And I think that wanting to do it right as you start coming out of the gate in a responsible way, many of them have their heart on their sleeve, where they're not just also thinking about the United States, they're also thinking about the world. What can we do for the world? And I think that many of the larger organizations that are trying to recruit these students are realizing that they really have to engage in a different way, which means transforming their own organizations to really value these perspectives and that entrepreneurial mindset. And I think that is going to be the key to innovation for many of these large organizations, as opposed to just the M&A that they're engaging with right now.
Yeah, I agree. Tonille, now you see things after the fact. So you have all of these bright-eyed, optimistic graduates who are ready to conquer the world, and they join some of these organizations that Juliette mentioned are still the machines. They're still machines, and then their organizations are expecting them to come in and be a cog. How are you helping to reshape some of that thought process?
Yes. Oh my gosh. This is probably my biggest pet peeve, is the fact that we are still treating people like machines and cogs, and we are still operating like it's 1925 or even worse. That I just can't stand it. And if I can't stand it, I'm sure these young, bright minds are really having a problem with it. And I actually wrote a whole chapter in my book about this, right? It's in my personal life. I have Netflix and Spotify and Amazon, all these very personalized, user-friendly, sexy apps. It's amazing. It's so just wow. And then you walk into work and you feel like you step back in time to do your job. And there's all kinds of friction and clunky technology. And I'm treated like a cog and all these other things. And we're not even talking about the microaggressions and all the other stuff that's happening. And so there's so much we could say about this, but I do see a lot of disheartenedness. And I think that it kind of a Juliette had alluded to is like a lot of this, the gig economy is kicking up. It has been for a while. It's absolutely ramping up even more so now. People are starting their own things. Even just having 5 side hustles is more enticing to a lot of people than to have to deal with all the different things. And we haven't even talked about all the things in the organizations that are causing friction. So having said that, the way that I tend to speak with leaders and my clients about this is just as much as possible, try to bring them into the future because they are still, the larger the organization, unfortunately, the further back they are, because usually it's harder to turn the ship around unless you're maybe micro. But it's a lot of just coaching about, hey, you see these disconnects and really leading with the numbers. What do the leaders care about? Retention, turnover, engagement, ROI. Are we innovative enough? All those different numbers that leaders really care about. I typically lead with that and show them, hey, by the way, we can actually bump these up and get them where you'd like them to be. And as a bonus, your people are happy. And as a bonus, they're being more innovative. And all these wonderful things we're chasing. These are the things you have to do to get there. And so it's a lot of things. As we know, there's a lot of levers in the organization we can pull. The technology is absolutely one of them. All kinds of other things like the employee experience, the employer contract, you can go on and on, culture, all those different things, leadership. The leaders have to really be engaged. Juliette, as we can have all the bright, shiny, impactful solutions we could have in our toolkit. But if leaders are just talking about it, but they're not actually going to do the action and do the movement and actually orchestrate it in the organization the way that it needs to be, then it's just going to be the strategy that we give them and it sits in a drawer. So a lot of my work is really pushing them to go beyond that, just ticking the box, but let's actually do it so you can see the numbers you want and actually feel better about your organization.
And revitalize your organization too. I think that so many companies are really hurting because of so much turnover. And the reality is that if they don't straighten up, ultimately they will become dinosaurs if they aren't already considered. Considering the amount of jobs that are come and go in the last few years, I don't know very many young people that are really excited about their job. They're excited about the idea of having a job. They're excited about the idea of making money, of perhaps independence from their parents, but very few that I'm seeing are actually excited about their job. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. So when we talk about at KPI doing an AI strategy and really stress testing that strategy, it includes all of that. It's not just about the technology. It's not just about the data, the deployment, the development. It's also about those humans, right? Do we have to think about humans? We are humans.
Are we?
That we are.
Sometimes I wonder.
I haven't sent my Juliette bot for this podcast. Not yet.
I was wondering about that deep fake happening or something like that.
God help us if they ever make a deep fake of me. No, Tonille, you mentioned this whole concept of we're seeing more of these bright-eyed people coming in and we're beating them down, but you're a huge advocate for this concept of creating a personal brand and building relationships with organization. And Juliette, you have a whole book on this, the 33 million people in a room deal. You guys are both huge advocates of this. Tonille, I want to start with you. How can these bright-eyed kids coming in, I call them kids because they are just out of college, they're ready to go, they're eager. They may not be excited about going to get a job in a large company specifically because they don't know what they're in for, but they may bring some ideas to them. How do we capture that and allow those folks to create that personal brand that actually brings and revitalizes the energy of the culture?
Yeah, there's so much we could say about this. And I know everybody probably has a different perspective, but what I learned this firsthand at PWC, brother. Before that, I didn't really know what that was. And they were very good about helping us not only understand what a personal brand is, understand why it's important to our career, but also how to do it. Very simply, we had literally a binder super thick on all the details on how you could do it, but literally just the short way for people to get started. Think of 3 words that you would want to be mentioned with your name in a room that you're not in. simple, right? So for a young person just starting out, I would think through, they may not know where they want to be in 5 or 10 or 20 years. Maybe they do, but as we all know here, that skills will be changing and jobs are changing. So we probably don't know any of that anyways, and it's going to shift. But the point is they can start to think about like themselves as a person. So maybe going inward a little bit and thinking about, maybe I don't know exactly the job I'm going to be doing in the future or this and that, because again, they're going to try things on as well early in their career, hopefully, and learn what they do and don't like as well. So keeping that in mind, but really think about, who do I want to be? How do I want to feel? Like how, that kind of thing. And so maybe just thinking of 3 different words that would really describe you at your very best when you're not in the room and maybe your boss is talking to somebody else and they're talking about an opportunity for you. So like thinking through what that might be. And then once you get very clear on what those words are, it's one of those things where you might want to put it on a Post-it on your laptop or have it in your phone, whatever, but literally continue to kind of like meditate and think on that, right? Like keep it simmering in the back of your mind and iterate it as you go through life if it changes. I've changed mine a little bit as I've gone through life and different roles and things like that. But essentially just always keeping that in your mind, because you want to be projecting and embodying those 3 words all the time, because that's the other part. It's one thing to say, oh, I want to be thought of as articulate and this and this. But if you're not embodying that at all times, people are not going to see you that way. And so you have to really think through that. And the reason why that's important is because there's a lot of times when you're not in the room or you don't have control over perceptions that people might have of you. But if you're very clear internally and it's aligned with your purpose or who you are as a person, and you just continue to embody that, whether it's work or otherwise, I think that number one, gets you psychologically not split, like you're actually closer to your real self and your true authentic self, which is absolutely important. But also other people know then, oh, if I want the person who's very future focused or very, this is their topic or this or that or whatever, the more that you really consistently embody that in all your interactions, people will always identify you with that. And then you'll be thought of for opportunities and just all kinds of different things. So I'll stop there. That was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but that's how I think about it as far as somebody that's just trying to get started, to get wrap their head around what the personal brand is, why it's important, that type of thing.
And I love hearing the answer from a branding expert, because that is one thing that I am not. I'm not coming from that perspective at all. I know absolutely nothing about marketing, but I think it's really interesting that you're able to come up with 3 words like that. And I now am challenging myself. What 3 words would I possibly use for myself? Tonille, I'm challenging you. Come up with 3 words by the time I give you my answer. See if it helps me along my own journey, because I come at it from a very different perspective, but I suspect we end up at the same place. So I was asked when I was 17 or 18 years old what my mission in life was. And I can tell you, as a teenager, I had no clue, no concept. I was completely flummoxed that I couldn't just come back with a fast answer. And that question has stayed with me my entire life. What is my mission? What is my mission? And of course, as I grew, I learned about Maslow and this idea of self-actualization. Yes, I want to be the best person that I can possibly be. What does that mean? What does that look like? And so every time an opportunity presents itself, whether on a personal level or on a professional level, I always ask myself, does this opportunity get me closer to that end goal, that end mission? Does it allow me to self-actualize over time? Does it get me closer to wanting to do good things in the world as opposed to things that might harm the world? All of these questions bubble up on a constant level. And so for me, the idea of creating a personal brand is very mission-based. It's very driven. It's about working backwards to, okay, again, if I have this end goal, what are the steps that I need to take to be able to get there 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line? I do this with my students as well. When I wrote my book, you're referring to 33 million people in the room. It was really the dawn of social media for business and for politics. And at that point, I had predicted that Obama would win just because of the power of his own personal branding and empowerment through these digital technologies. It had nothing to do with whether he was a Democrat or a Republican or even an independent. It's about the way that the technology is used. And the same thing, we see Trump doing this incredibly effectively, whether you agree with his premise or not. Ultimately, that ability to self-brand, not just within the organization, within your own heart, but also on the outside, where in most cases, people will get an impression of who you are well before they ever meet you through digital technology, right? They're going to Google you, they're going to use ChatGPT, they're going to go onto your LinkedIn and other various distribution methods online. And ultimately, that's what happens when you apply for a job, for an apartment, for anything else. So I think that moving beyond just your mission and the 3 words, but also consciously pushing out those things that you really believe in a digital space. And I think also connecting with others that believe in the same things that you do, that are working towards the things that you do, help you build your brand by also empowering others, because it's not just about you, it's about this larger idea of what can we accomplish while we're here on the planet together.
I love that. And that also speaks to, if you think about like the identity piece, like the 5 people you spend the most time with. So to your point, connecting with those people that are your tribe, if you can, whether it's virtual or in person. And then you also touched on the whole, hey, if you're going to be a content creator, which we know a lot of the young folks are doing that. And we all are in some regard a content creator if we're publishing even a LinkedIn article or a post. So I think to your point, there's so many threads that come in here, right? Because if we have our 3 words, we know our mission, we know our purpose, that's awesome. But perception is reality. So we have to, like you said, push that out there, project it out there, whether it's content, the way we operate, that type of things. I love that.
Quick question. So what are the 3 words you use for me, Tonille? Now because I never know what title to give myself. I'm always at a loss and 3 different words come up every time. So what would you suggest? You're really good at this stuff.
I appreciate that. And I got to tell you, I can't give you your 3 words. I can give you my 3 words,
Okay.
and maybe that will help get things simmering. But I think it's one of those activities where you really do want to spend a lot of time on it. Like when I first did it several years ago, I spent a couple of weeks just simmering and being like, I don't really think that's quite right anymore. And just honing as you go. But for me, I've really tried to be like thoughtful is one that I really want to be perceived as. So I'm articulate, I'm thoughtful, I do the research, that type of thing, deliberate, that whole like chunk there. Also, I'm very much a change maker. So a change maker would be another word for me. And then I think the third one would be service oriented. So internally, I'm thoughtful about things. I want to push the needle and change things. And then also I want to be service oriented.
So these are qualifications. That's so interesting, because the way that I internalized what you were asking was, what are the jobs that I do? And I guess because I've aligned what I do as for a living with who I am as a person and who I aspire to be. But I'm so glad that we got a little bit more into the weeds on that. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah. And I think you hit on something just there that's super important, that most people, for better or worse, whether they want to or not, because our society operates this way, we do identify who we are with what we do. Oh, I'm a mom, I'm an accountant, I'm a neighbor, that kind of thing. And that's great, because those are roles, but those are like hats we wear. That's not who we are. So
lifetime learner. There you go.
That's good. I like that.
This is something that I think everybody can take away something from, because I believe that we all need to spend more time thinking about who we want to be when we grow up, not just what we want to be, but who we want to be when we grow up. And I would say, at least for me, I'm still not there yet. I still don't feel like I've grown up, and I hope I never do, honestly. But the idea behind it is I think we all have a capability of changing into be and refining who that is going to be over time to become that person we want to be. So
yeah, again and again. Yeah, that's part of the American dream, right? Once you get close to that dream, you have to come up with something else. So I think it's part of growth, personal growth.
Totally. Absolutely. I've actually been thinking about that a lot lately, because I think on one hand, I love the idea of moving the bar, right? So always pushing more. I think that's wonderful. It's how we get to the highest mountains, especially in the US. That's like how we operate. But then I've also lately been like thinking a lot about like, when is it enough? Whose bar is it? Like, and there's nothing right or wrong about these questions or perspectives. I've been thinking like, is there another thought around it? And I've been exploring this more thing of like, how am I being more than what I'm doing? And that's been a super interesting thought experiment.
It's funny you bring that up. And Michael, I know you have lots of questions, but let me just throw this in. So this idea of moving the bar, of moving the challenge, aligning that challenge with how many skills that you're learning. So I'm thinking about the state of flow. For me, the ability to find that state of flow as I grow, as I learn, as I do, is part of that self-actualization process, where I can literally forget about everything else and focus on this one thing. And I think to a certain extent, it's a form of meditation, but at the same time, you accomplish so much more. And then this idea of group flow, where you're in this really amazing team where people actually like each other and work well with each other, where the leadership is not based on a specific role, but also based on the skill that is required for that particular task, that particular project or client. These are the things that I think are just make you far more than just a cog, no matter what your situation is within the organization.
Yeah, I love that. That's honestly what almost all the leaders I speak to are looking for that, right? Like, how do we get our people to your point, have that group flow situation where there's psychological safety and everyone's super innovative. And to your point, doesn't matter what your title is, you're leading from every level. It's what that, and it's so rare because unfortunately we can control ourselves, but we can't control other people. And so we can do our best, but it's, you really almost need a role or a person to orchestrate that, I think. The manager could be good if they're a good manager to make that happen.
Yes, let's hear it for the great managers.
Yay. Are there any? No, I'm just kidding.
But no, you do bring a
I'm
really good point
kidding.
up, which is, okay, so we go back to this whole concept of purpose and linking that back to vision. So when you have, let's say, a great leader, and I would say like Steve Jobs is one who I would put as a great leader, someone who may inspire people to be their best. He may not have the best tactics sometimes, but he was someone who actually pushed people to be their best. As you joked around, the fact is that we don't see that a lot these days. And I know business schools, and not going to pick on NYU at all, but just generic business schools, when you're going for an MBA, they're not necessarily teaching you about the vision part, they're teaching you about the execution part. And that whole vision and the viewpoint of how to be an inspirational leader, inspirational visionary leader to help your people get to that point, I think is something that is, I want to say, it's not beat out of you, but it's something that's trained out of you as part of that concept. You'll end up with an MBA, you end up learning how to really execute well at business. But out of that, just like when we're children, we have these visions and these dreams, and we get together and we would play and make this make-believe world happen. As we get trained more and more, I believe some of that gets trained out of us. How do we retrain that creativity back in to allow us to be vulnerable enough to be as a team and execute on something where perhaps there isn't a vision that's as clear as we'd like it or need it to be?
I feel like you packed in so many different questions and ways to respond to what you just said. So first and foremost, and I hope it's okay if I'm going first here, Tonille, just because I think you have to pick your university. So you're talking about business school, and I was very surprised to see the differences in different business schools. I was asked recently actually, pre-pandemic, to go speak at Cambridge University. And I also visited Oxford, and I was completely astounded at what I found there, because the students were learning things that I had never seen at Columbia, never seen at MIT, never seen at Stanford. They are trained specifically not on how to build something. They are trained on how to create and run these world-class companies, which is a very different thing than learning how to create a startup and then grow it, which is a very different thing than learning how to scale a company and move from company to company, which many people are very good at, very solicited group of people. But you have different schools of thought. And so I think it's very important not to generalize. It is incredibly important to pick your school. And if there's no school out there that actually matches what you're looking for, we have so many tools right now that allow us to learn these things online. We can learn them in groups. We can learn them in communities. We can learn them in many different places. And more they're becoming relevant when you go into the work environment. So I think it's really important to keep in mind. In fact, some of the smartest people that I know that are running incredible organizations, in some cases founded them, and in some cases they just stumbled upon them and were recognized as people that could build more, that they're self-taught, right? And that idea of playfulness being weaned out of you through school or society, I think it depends on your childhood. I personally started working when I was a kid, and I never had the kind of childhood that you're describing. So now I feel like I get to play and at the same time make money as opposed to just playing to play. So for me, it's all the more fun. So I guess, again, it's all in your frame of mind, the way you look at it. Tonille, I'm very curious to hear what you have to say to that in response.
Yeah, no, I love what you shared. I can totally relate. Same thing. I've always been the worker bee, never really had the childhood piece. And now I feel like I'm on the playground every single day and you get paid. It's just the most amazing thing. And I think that too, I think you and I both understand that a lot of that comes also with, again, back to not the brand necessarily, but knowing who you are, right? Like knowing what you want, who you are, what you need, especially as we get older, we should be getting to know ourselves better, to know the environments we need to put ourselves in so that we can be frolicking and playing all day, or we feel like it is, even if others don't. I guess when I think of how managers or leaders could actually orchestrate that type of environment, I'll go there with this one. And I think about like people, the leader needs to have that vision. Like, where are we going? Why do we want to get there? Like the strategy, like we need that as like the guardrails. Cause I think one of the things I hear from a lot of young folks in organizations is, I don't even know how my job and anything I do connects to anything else. There's no meaning there. There's no connection. They don't even know why they're doing the spreadsheets. So I think the leader's job, no matter what level you're at, is really setting that stage and like, hey, these are the awesome 3 strategic initiatives we're trying to get done this year. And this is why, because this is how it's going to make us this better and do this and whatever. Convey that to people and make it enticing and interesting, right? Even have someone write the speech for you if you have to, but do that as the beginning. I mean, we do this work. So we know that lots of times, I don't care if someone writes it for you, but literally get it out there because it's for the people. It's not for you, the leader. And once they have that, then we need to actually create the environment where we say, hey, here's some guardrails or constraints, if there are some, whether it's timing, budget, whatever the case may be, but you go figure out how to do it. To your point earlier, Juliette, let's co-create. Let's let you figure out the best way to get there, because then your creativity, your play, your innovation comes out and you're more committed to it, et cetera, and better solutions most likely because the people on the ground are closer to the client, they're closer to the problems, et cetera. And then I think the other thing I would say that though, we also need to create that psychologically safe culture where people can fail, they can play, they can try something out. And if it doesn't work, it's fine. So that's just like off the top of my head. Those are the main things I think we need to actually have in place for people at any level to feel comfortable to play and frolic and all those good things.
Yeah. And also building on this idea of psychological safety, the ability for the organization to actually give value to ideas that are coming from people that might be the cleaners, might be people that are entry level, but they still have great ideas. And to be able to raise those ideas, regardless of where they come from, has to start with the top. That has to be taught by example from the leadership.
By the way, that example may or may not sound that groundbreaking, but what you just said is actually one of the most important things, because it doesn't matter where the ideas come from. And in fact, I was listening to a podcast earlier with Jamie Dimon, actually, and he was saying how, like, he didn't say that they like hired people that were their cleaners to be, bankers. But what he did say was that we have to make sure that we're treating and creating the same environment for someone who is a cleaner, a janitor, a teller, whatever, as we are for our senior executives. And he was actually talking about also how they've gotten more innovative as far as hiring goes. And like, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head. He was saying that, gosh, I almost feel like it was like, I don't want to put a number out there, but it was quite a large number. A surprisingly large number of their people are actually ex-convicts. Not in the sense that, like, I'm a banker and I did something white collar crime.
Actually?
Yeah, no, it wasn't that, but it's more so like hiring from new pools of people.
And felons. They kind of.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, but I was actually very surprised that he was saying there's quite a lot of their people that they've hired in the last several years happen to have been previously convicted felons for minor crimes, or as minor as it can be, I guess, as for a felony. But the point is that they can come in and do some of these jobs. And I was just really blown away by that. I thought, wow, you guys could hire anybody. The cream of the crop.
Sorry, I get nervous when people say that they're hiring ex-cons, not because I have any problems with ex-cons, but because I also see that a lot of these people tend to get exploited in the technology world, where we're asking ex-cons now to label data, for example, which can be very per person, especially when you're seeing a lot of violent content. And if you're an ex-con, or even a con, if you're still in prison, I don't know to what extent that is a positive outcome. I guess it depends on how you're executed, or how it's executed, but at any rate, I diverged the conversation. I apologize.
No, that's actually a really great point, because I was hearing a lot about that too recently, and I didn't hear it with the angle of the ex-con, but just in general, the people that they are employing, to your point, to do this, is it called tagging? Is that what it is?
In some cases, it's tagging. In some other cases, it's training, labeling.
Yep. Yeah, that you're right, though. This is really important. Because to your point, like we think about that as well as like when we think about who's training the large language models, think about all the bias. And to your point, there's bias on that point, but then there's also, to your point, of these people are having to go through this and see these images. And yeah, I can't imagine that would be healthy
for anybody. Yeah.
But we have certainly taken a circuitous turn through our craziness as we talk through this. But I believe all of these things go back to the same thing, and that is we are all, and as part of that humanity that we share, that expression shouldn't be stifled and put into that cog mentality for our organizations, because they're likely not going to get the best version of us. They're going to get a version, but probably not the best version of us. So my last question to both of you is, how can an organization get the best version of me while I'm working for them? Tonille, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can jump in here. Just one thing, it's hard to narrow it down, but what I would say is just, it's more of a mindset of think of your people as human beings who happen to be working for you, not workers or machines who happen to be in the organization. So just really, I always go back to the employee experience. So as much as possible, leaders and HR leaders and other folks in the organization, as much as you possibly can, try to just put yourself in the shoes of your employees and think about what would they want? Like, how would this impact them? This change we're doing, this technology we're implementing, et cetera, et cetera. Just think about like, how is that going to impact them? And that's a lot of where my work comes in. So I take it for granted, but essentially getting yourself in their shoes, finding out how things will impact them, what's going to benefit them, what's in it for them, what they need to adopt the changes or whatever you're trying to get them to do. So just thinking through that ahead of time before you launch things on people, I think could get you very far.
And actually, to build on that, I think the best way to do that is actually asking them directly, not doing surveys, not trying to observe how you think that they're going to react in a certain context, but actually asking them, bringing them into the conversation and actually taking note of what they're saying, implementing it. Another thing that's really important is to give them a reason to care. Right. So if I better understand what this product is doing, how it's helping the company, how it's actually helping end users, everyday people, I'm going to care a lot more, especially if my payment is commensurate with it. So one of the things that we've been doing a lot of different projects, but one of my favorite ones is with somebody out of MIT by the name of Nelson Repany. You're going to see his book coming out next year, which showcases a lot of these different tips. But my favorite one is creating these visual walls, these visual firewalls, where you have meetings on a weekly basis where everybody in the organization gets to see what are the top priorities for the organization right now. And as these priorities change, the top thing changes. And these visual boards are everywhere so that every single employee, regardless of, again, where they are in the hierarchy, can see it, can own it, can understand how they fit into this larger thing. And I think that empowerment, as well as the openness to ideas from every level within the organization, and also not necessarily clapping down on a specific type of education and really finding the best people for the job, not the jobs of the past, but the jobs of the future, which means that they're going to be technologically literate. They're going to be open-minded. They're going to be open for connecting, communication, and collaboration. All of these key things are incredibly important. And most important of all, at least to somebody like me, is teaching by example. You can get all the best speech writers in the world, but if you as the leader do not actually embody these things, nobody is going to want to follow you.
Said. I want to say thank you to both of you. I know our listeners now have some homework. They've got to come up with their 3 words, and that may take a long time. I know I have that homework. So I appreciate you bringing that to light, Tonille, for all of us. And again, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate the conversation. It's very insightful. I really appreciate the intellect that both of you share. And this conversation was amazing. I look forward to doing this again.
You're on.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of intelligent automation, subscribe now. The future of work is here.